About half of American ranchers use some kind of rotational grazing program. Most get modest benefits from better animal distribution, but very few of them reap the rewards that come from really good grazing management. In spite of their rotations, no, actually because of their rotations, most have increased labor, sacrificed animal performance, and continue to overgraze every pasture every year. They don't really rotationally graze, they rotationally overgraze. Let me be clear about this. 8 out of 10 ranchers who think they're rotationally grazing are actually rotationally overgrazing. Most of them may not even know what overgrazing is. They probably confuse overgrazing with overstocking. Now, neither is good, but they're different. And if you expect to make a living from grazing livestock and ranch for profit, it's important to understand the difference. At least I think it is. Overstocking occurs when you have more animals than feed, when the stocking rate, the demand, is greater than the carrying capacity, the supply. Now, in the short term, overstocking will result in lousy animal performance. It'll impact the animals before it harms the pasture. But keep it up, and it'll lead to long-term lower productivity and lower range health. So, overstocking is a function of animal numbers. Overgrazing, on the other hand, doesn't have anything to do with supply and demand. It has nothing to do with animal numbers, not the number of animals in the herd or in the pasture. Overgrazing is strictly a function of time. Overgrazing means grazing a plant before it's recovered from a previous grazing. And there are 2 ways to do it. Stay in a pasture too long a graze period, or come back to that pasture too soon, too short a rest period. Now, how long a recovery period plants need depends on how fast they're growing. When things are growing slowly, we need a long recovery period. When growth is fast, recovery periods can be shorter. You got it? Slow growth, long recovery. Fast growth, shorter recovery. The biggest mistake people make in grazing management is not giving plants enough time to recover after grazing, before grazing them again. Now, regardless of the recovery period, we need at least 8 to 10 paddocks per herd to stop overgrazing. Look, let's say I need a recovery period of 60 days. If I'm set stocked in one big pasture, the graze period is 365 days a year. And the recovery period? Well, I don't have one, do I? I'll have severe overgrazing and overrest in the same pasture. Overgrazed and overrested plants side by side. It probably looks a lot like your horse pasture. Now, let's say I split the pasture in half. Now I have 2 pastures. To get the 60-day recovery period on one side, I've got to keep the herd on the other side for 60 days. Well, a 60-day graze period is just too long. Livestock will selectively graze nutritious, palatable regrowth on the previously grazed plants. They'll overgraze. So, let's split the pasture again. Now I have 4 pastures. 3 of them will be resting. So, I need 20 days of grazing on each pasture to get the 60-day recovery in the other pasture that we're aiming at. 20 days for a graze period? That's not good enough either. There will be significant regrowth by then, and we'll still get overgrazing. So let's split them again. Now we've got 8 pastures. 7 of them are resting. That comes to 8.6 days. We'll call it 8.5 days of grazing. The graze period, a little over a week. So we've got the graze period down to just over a week. Now, if 60 days is the right recovery period, there probably won't be much regrowth by then. So we've probably stopped the overgrazing. It takes 8 to 10 paddocks to stop overgrazing. But what if things are growing faster or slower? Well, whether we need a 30-day recovery or a 180-day recovery, you're going to find that 8 to 10 paddocks per herd will stop the overgrazing. But 8 to 10 paddocks per herd isn't enough. Animal performance will suffer. Here's why. Animals graze selectively. They graze the best things on the first couple of days of the graze period. So both the quantity and quality of forage consumed will drop the longer animals stay in a pasture. This is why a lot of people experience more productivity per acre when they stop overgrazing, but worse animal performance. No, to get the rest we need and support good animal performance, we need more paddocks per herd. We figure we need 14 to 16 pastures per herd to support that good performance. And even then, if you really want to see rapid range improvement and support good livestock performance, you're going to need more. Probably 24, 25 pastures per herd. There are many ranching for profit graduates who use many more, 40, 50, 60 paddocks per herd. Some even have 100 paddocks per herd. Ask them why they do it, and they'll tell you, because it's profitable. That may seem like a lot of work, but most people working at that level of intensity find that their workload actually goes down. This isn't just about the number of paddocks per herd. It's also about understanding how long the recovery period should be and keeping the graze period short, increasing the stock density, and matching the stocking rate to the carrying capacity to avoid overstocking. It's also about matching enterprises to the environment and the production schedule of those enterprises to your environment. So here's the bottom line. Fewer than 8 to 10 paddocks per herd, and you're rotationally overgrazing. You aren't doing much good with 8 to 10 paddocks per herd. It'll stop the overgrazing, but it's like water skiing slow. If the boat isn't moving above a minimum speed, you're going to get wet. So when it comes to rotational grazing, that minimum speed, that minimum number of paddocks you need to get worthwhile results, it's 14 to 16 paddocks per herd. And if you really want to see rapid range improvement, you're going to need even more.